Infect me. Give me HIV. I want it. These are the words that people who refer to themselves as bug chasers often use. And joining me on Plus Talk today is Nathaniel J Hall, who has just done a fascinating documentary on this topic, bug chasing. Good to see you, Nathaniel.
Oh, hi. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing really well. Your documentary left my jaw on the floor. Now, what is bug chasing?
Well, so bug chasing is a sexual fetish, a phenomenon. It's happening in a minority of cases. It's a really, really small minority, a minority within a minority within a minority, almost, if you will. But bug chasers are people who fetishize the HIV virus. So within the community, you have people who are chasing, so people who are actively seeking to become HIV positive themselves. And then you have people who gift, so people who are not taking HIV medication, who pass it on. Now, I'd heard about, which I've been diagnosed with HIV for 20 years, and anyone that lives with HIV, who's a gay man or is a man who has sex with men, has probably been asked at some point whether they would gift their HIV, so I've been aware of it. And there's also lots of stories about Russian roulette parties and barebacking parties and this kind of thing. Sort of rumors abound within our community. And I just was really fascinated to try and understand, is it actually happening? Are people engaged in this? Is it just fantasy? Is it just something that plays out online? What's going on here? And if people are doing it, why are they doing it as well?
When you hear statements like I just made at the top there, infect me, give me HIV, I want your toxic load. How does that make you feel as somebody who is passionate like I am in the fight ending HIV and stopping the spread and U equals U and stuff like that?
Most of my life is like sort of trying to educate people, tell people how to not get HIV. And we walk this really tricky line, don't we? Because we're constantly as activists going, if you get HIV, it's going to be okay. Like there's medication, particularly, not in every context, but in the US and the UK, there is access to medication, and for the most part, you're going to be okay. But that betrays a truth that we know that life with HIV is more difficult still. There is still HIV stigma. We don't really know about what getting old with HIV looks like. Will we be looked after properly in care settings? All these kind of things and increased psychological impacts. We walk this line of sort of going, it's okay if you get HIV, don't worry about it. I'm trying to reduce the stigma, but also trying to stop people from getting it. So when I hear things like that, it's quite challenging for me. But I do recognise that as someone who's lived with HIV for 20 years, my take on it is quite biased. And that was one of the other reasons why I wanted to make the documentary and challenge my own preconceptions and speak to people who don't think like me on the subject to maybe learn something more about it.
You described the process as exhausting because of the group self-harm. What do you mean by that?
As I spoke to the Dr. Jamie, who we meet in the documentary, and that was obviously a very long conversation, a 20-minute documentary. It's cut down to just a few moments, really. But what that conversation revealed was very much what I experienced, is that people mostly are playing this out as a sort of online authoring of a fantasy, so like co-writing these kind of fantasies together. And actually that most people, Dr. Jamie's research revealed, are not actually engaging in it in any real context. It is a fantasy, and it's about the playing with risk and enhances sexual pleasure. But there are people that are actually, I found, and I believe, having spoken to them at some length, doing it in real life. And I think I found it exhausting. As the research for the documentary, I threw myself into lots of different forums, not just on kind of hookup apps, but specific websites that are set up for this conversation to take place. There's a lot of dark stuff. It's a little bit like the dark web in a sense there, and sort of threw myself into these groups. And whilst not everyone who bug chases is into these things, there was a lot of crossover into things like chemsex, people that, I was witnessing images and videos of people injecting one another with drugs, lots of profound self-harm, a lot of derogatory language, extreme BDSM and fetish, which looked quite harmful. And so just immersing myself in that world is what I needed to do in trying to reach people and meet people. took a bit of a toll on me, and on my mental well-being as well.
Yeah. Do you think that those sort of, let's call them extreme acts, are a form of self-stigma for a lot of people, especially those of us living with HIV?
I think in some cases it is the case that it is that going on, and in a sense we should have compassion for people that find themselves, stuck in cycles of what feel like kind of quite harmful behaviours, and often addictive behaviours as well. If drugs and sex, we know, are a very powerful combination, but also in some cases, and in some people I met and spoke to, I just don't think that was the case. I think people were more empowered and had less hang-ups about sex and sexuality than I did. And in a sense, I sort of was looking at them and going, have I got this all wrong here? Like, am I policing my body and other people's bodies in a way that is problematic? So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all approach to this. And certainly with bug chasing, there's a whole myriad of reasons why people say that they sort of fetishize HIV, or why they're sort of into this as a kind of sexual fantasy.
Yeah, well, that's because, I think there's an idea, and you touch on this in the documentary. Well, I'm going to end up HIV positive anyway. I might as well do it my way, and in a way that is kind of a turn on for me.
There is a documentary from the States called The Gift, which is on YouTube, which came out in 2003. So a very different context. So we didn't have, the knowledge we had around U equals U, people taking effective medication, not being able to pass it on, or, the knowledge we had around PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, stopping people, or people able to take tablets to stop themselves contracting HIV, and all those different options. And that very much focuses on that aspect, really. And some of the people I met said the same thing. They said, well, actually, the fear of getting HIV, or maybe not even the fear, just the kind of will I, won't I, was getting in the way of them being able to explore their sexuality and their full their full kind of sexual expression, and relax into that. And so getting HIV on their terms was the sort of logical next step. And then within that, the minute you sort of step into this world, then you sort of discover that there is a whole culture of people who are into this and exchanging kind of, sexual messages and sexual fantasies, which then I think people kind of fall into.
Well, but interestingly too, we're talking about the chasers there, but as you said, the other side of this coin is the gifters, as they're called. These are HIV positive people who are not taking meds, who know their status, are not taking meds, and are willingly going out there, and I guess it's consensual because both parties either are meeting on the terms of this is what we're going to go down and do. But I struggle to wrap my head around anybody who is HIV positive, A, who doesn't want to get on treatment and be healthy, and B, is gifting this virus to somebody, especially when you look at the generations before us who lived in complete terror and fear that they would pass this on to somebody. And certainly in my own case, before the science of U equals U, the damage that it did to a 27-year-old Carl when he was diagnosed, and the 10 years until I found out about U equals U, the fear that I was going to be responsible for potentially killing somebody else. How did you come to terms with the person that you met in the documentary who is a gifter?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because whilst I found obviously what he was talking about really confronting, and obviously in the same way to you, like I've lived with HIV for 20 years, much of that without the knowledge of U equals U, so living with that fear and that constant kind of worry, and never ever wanting to pass this on. And and I think most people with HIV would say the same. But also, he was just like, is he a really lovely normal bloke? Like, we had quite a long chat. We both on camera and off camera, and he didn't seem unreasonable. And the really tricky thing with this whole situation is we're not talking about reckless transmission here. We're not talking about people going out and intentionally passing it on to other people, which is rare but does happen. We're talking about people doing this consensually, and in a sense, if you can think it, someone will be doing it sexually. That's kind of the broad range of human sexuality. And whilst it's difficult for us to wrap our heads around, unfortunately, I don't really have any answer as to how we challenge or address that, other than maybe looking at the wider impacts of HIV and AIDS.
Yeah, well, the documentary is called Bug Chasers, The Men Who Want HIV. It was a short film for Channel 4, but it is available on YouTube. So I highly suggest you check it out. It's a really, really interesting watch. Nathaniel J. Hall, thanks for coming back to talk to me at Plus Talk. Always good to see you, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. That is going to do it for this episode of Plus Talk, where we're all about turning positive into a plus. If you want more information about what we've talked about today, or to check out the documentary Bug Chasers, The Men Who Want HIV, we'll put all the information up on the website. And remember, you can follow us across social media. We are at Plus Life Media, and the website is pluslifemedia.com. Until next time, bye-bye.